To get started on this project, you should have downloaded the Vectobot's trading card information from the classroom page. Inside of it, I'm giving you a variety of different parts that make up this entire project. One of the first things to note is the trading card template. This template is an Illustrator file and it has 5 different cards, all of the same size. If you want, you can go ahead and double click on it and open it up to get an idea of how this is laid out. When you finish each of your robots, you'll place one inside of each of the different cards, along with its name and any other decorations you want to have. The first thing we need to do is to recreate a set of heads for each one of these. Keep in mind, you're only having to do 5 different robots, and these heads are a good starting point. Once a head is finished, we can add on the body parts, and all of these are already vectorized. So essentially, you just need to select them and then colorize it. And then finally, we're going to add a name to each one of these. You've got 5 different names. There's no particular order these have to be in, but they're all individual JPEGs. In order to vectorize them, we're going to have to use image trace. To get started, I would open up the body parts first. Opening up this Illustrator file allows you to be able to select and see all of the different color schemes as well as the body parts. Plus, we can work outside of this area to recreate each of the different head parts. So with the body parts open, let's go up to File and down to Place, and let's locate the folder for the Vectobots, and then let's locate the heads and open up the JPEG for the heads and place it inside of here. When you click and drag, this will place our image. And do note, this image is nice and pixelated. How you choose to recreate each of the heads is going to be up to you. These can be a starting point, or you can try to create it as faithfully as possible to the original, but the method and the tools and the shapes that you choose to use are going to be up to you. We'll zoom out. Another thing you can do to help set up your document is to create an artboard for it. To do this, you can grab your artboard tool, click and drag to create a little open area, and now when we start to recreate things, this will give us a nice solid white background. You can then use your selection tool to move this into place and scale it as needed. Finally, before we get started, go over to your Layers panel, and let's make a new layer on top of all of these parts. Going down to the bottom of here, you can select Create New Layer. This will give us layer 3. And I'm going to call this my Heads layer. I can lock down my parts and even the colors so I don't accidentally select or delete or otherwise modify anything from here. From there, I can open up my Properties panel. One other thing to note is that I'm working in the Essentials workspace for now. Also, if necessary, you can open up your toolbars and you can either work with the basic or the advanced setting for your toolbars. The advanced setting just gives you access to all of your tools, and that's typically what I like to do, so I'm going to always keep it at advanced. I'm going to zoom in and start recreating each one of the different heads. Again, you only have to do 5 of them, so I'm going to pick 5 that have some good teachable parts to these. To make this easier, think of the head as each of the different shapes that it makes up. Each of these shapes can then be modified as necessary, not just modifying the color or the outline, but also the overall details of the shape that make them up. So for instance, if I wanted to recreate this guy, he can easily be made first as a base of a simple rectangle. So I'm going to choose my rectangle tool. I'm going to set my fill color. Technically it doesn't matter, but I'm just going to make it red so I can see it. And I'm going to set my stroke to be none, so it'll be set to 0. I'll start off by clicking and dragging and roughly make the size of it. Again, it doesn't have to be exactly the same. I'm just going to eyeball the position of everything. I do know I need to round off these edges, so I can click on my corner widgets, and the top can be nice and rounded, but I want these bottom 2 corners to not be so rounded. So using my direct selection tool, I can click on each corner. Whoops, let me zoom back in. And then I can bring that down. Since I want both of these corners to be the same, I'm going to hold down Shift and also select this corner as well as this corner. Now when I click and drag, both of those are exactly the same as well too. Going over to this guy, He's also a rectangle, but the top and bottom of his head is slightly curved. In order to achieve that effect, one more time, I'm going to get my rectangle and click and drag to roughly make it out. In order to curve the top and bottom edges, let's locate our reshape tool that's hiding underneath your scale tool. With that, we can click on this top edge to add a little point and also the bottom edge to add a point. In order to manipulate these points, let's grab our direct selection tool. Then you can click just on this anchor point and drag it upward, and you can see how it curves there. Let's do the same for the bottom. Click and drag it downward to curve out that bottom edge. We'll zoom out and look at some of the other ones that have a little bit more complex type shapes. If you wanted to create a half circle type shape for this guy, let's choose our ellipse tool. We'll hold down the shift key as we click and drag to draw off a nice circle. To cut it in half, we've got a couple of different options. We could choose the little edges over here on the side and open it up to be whatever edge we want it to be, or we can use our Pathfinder. In order to do this, let's create a rectangle. I'm going to create a rectangle right on top of this one that bisects it right in half. If necessary, we can nudge it up till it's right about there. With both of them selected, we can go over to our Properties panel and let's choose minus front to cut it away. That's the easiest way to dial in exactly what we want. Let's back out now and look at some others. Going back over to this head shape, since I've already got a half circle created for this guy, I'm going to hold down my Option key with my black arrow selection tool and click and drag to make a copy of it. Then, since I've already got my half circle, I just need to round off the corners. Grab your direct selection tool. You can see how you've got your corner widgets that lets you click and drag to round off those. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect. I'm simply trying to mimic it as close as possible. Right now we've got 4 done, so let's choose one more. I'm going to choose this guy because I like his little rounded antennas. For him, I'm going to start him off as a basic rectangle. Again, I need to round this upper portion, and it looks like I need to round it a good bit. I could use my reshape tool, but in this case, let's see if we can draw an ellipse. Again, this time I'm going to zoom in, click and drag to make my ellipse as a starter point, and then I'm going to use my black arrow to see if I can stretch it out until it touches the edges here. Then I can move it upward until it fits nicely along that top edge. If I wanted to join both of these together, I can select both of those, go over to my Properties panel, and choose Unite. Now I've got the top edge done. Let's round off the bottom edge of this. One more time, I'm going to choose my direct selection tool, click on this bottom edge, and drag it inward just a bit. Finally, I need to make it a little bit shorter. I want to bring this bottom edge upward. So with my direct selection tool, I'm going to click and drag over these bottom corners. So only these bottom 4 are selected. And then I can click carefully on the path and drag it straight up to get the shape that I need. If you don't like clicking on the path, you can also use your arrow keys on your keyboard to dial in the exact size and amount that you want. With each of these done, I'm going to do Command 0 to back out. And you can see I've got 5 different shapes ready to go, and I'll line them up a little bit better under here. Now let's look at some of the details that we can add to it. I'm going to start with the eyes. If you'll notice, some of the eyes on the robots are made up of complex and compound shapes. You've got multiple circles, maybe a couple of different colors in it. Some have highlights and shadow edges. Other eyes are kept super simple, like it's just a simple little ellipse, and maybe it's inside of a little other shape. That's to add some contrast. So the amount of detail that you want to add to your eyes, whether they have eyelids or even eyebrows, is up to you as well. Now, in order to create some of these, we may have to make some compound shapes. But note, once you make one of them, it's a simple matter of duplicating it to have the other. Let's recreate these eyes. Since they're made up of ellipses, make sure you've got your ellipse tool selected, and I'm going to reset this back to the default of white fill with a black stroke. I'll click and drag to give me a starting point, and if necessary, you may want to drag it onto your robot just to see what size it'll be. we can change this up later. Remember, whenever you create your stroke, you can change the settings of it, making it thicker or thinner as necessary. Maybe for this one, I won't make it thicker, but I will put it on the outside edge. So I'm going to change my stroke to be on the outside of it and maybe a little bit thinner. That looks good. I'm going to zoom in, make it a little bit smaller. Remember, when you scale things with a stroke, you want to make sure that scale, stroke, and effects is either checked on or off depending on the size you want it to be. When I scaled that down just a little bit, check out the size of it now. It decreased by 1 point just a little bit. To make the inside of the eye, I'm going to select it. Let's do an edit and copy, then edit, and I'm going to paste it right in front of what's here. So there's a copy right on top of it. From here, I'm going to set my fill color to be a different color. I'm just going to choose something different so I can see it. And I'm going to turn my stroke off by setting it down to 0. Then I can scale this inward. Holding down the Shift key and the Option or the Alt key will let you scale inward until you get the size that you want. So Shift, Option if you're on a Mac, or Alt on a Windows will let you scale that way. Finally, let's add either a highlight or a shadow edge to this. Now there's a couple of different ways we could do this. In order to make a highlight, it could be as simple as grabbing your ellipse tool, setting your fill color to be just a solid white, and then drawing off another little circle and putting it up at the top. That looks like a nice highlight. If we wanted to have a curved shadow edge that follows the curvature of this, we need to do something a little more complex. I'm going to make a copy of my iris that's inside of here. We'll drag it off to this side. Then, one more time, I'm going to make another copy and drag it up and over. In order to see this, I'm going to change the color just so you get an idea of what I'm doing. Let's make it a little bit darker or something different. There we go. Now that I have 2 of these, I can select both of them. I could either use my Pathfinder, or if you want some practice using the Shape Builder tool, hold down the Option key, click and drag, and erase that away. Now I've got this selected and it remains. With it selected, let's make it slightly darker. So you can either find a darker version of it, or you can open up your color picker here by double clicking and then move it down to be slightly darker. That looks good there. Finally, we can move it back into place right on top of what's there. Now it has a darker edge. Since I want to make a copy of all of this, I'm going to lock down my background layer. So I'm going to go to Object, Lock, Selection. So now my head is completely locked. And that will let me click and drag over all of this and select the entire thing. Let's go up to Object and Group. Now that these are grouped, all I need to do is to hold down my Option key to make a copy of it, and boom goes the dynamite. Let's back out now and look at our other. Since this is essentially the same thing, I could easily make a copy of it and bring it over here. He's got some little eyebrows up at the top, which are simply little rectangles that have been skewed over. So let's make those. Since I've got a copy of it made, maybe I can change up the color of this as well to be something a little bit different. I'm going to double click on it to go into isolation mode. I can then select this circle. Let's change the color of these to be maybe more of a red. I can also select the highlight of it, or excuse me, the shadow side of it. Let's choose a darker red for that one. Now I can exit my isolation mode by going back. And one more time, let's hold down Option and make a copy of that eyeball. In order to make the swooping little eyebrows that are up here, let's see what we can do with our rectangle tool. So with my rectangle selected, I'm going to work outside of it just to make it easier to select. We'll click and drag. I know I can round off the corners of it, so I'm going to choose this bottom corner and round it off. And I'm going to choose this top corner and round it off. But I want this top corner to go the opposite direction. So with it still selected, let's go over to my Properties panel and open up the Transform. This top edge that we have, I think is this one right here. And I'm going to change the corner type to be a inverted corner. So now it looks like this. And let's invert it this way. Finally, if I wanted to make it a little bit longer, hang on, let's bring this over. All I need to do is to select this anchor point, hold down Shift, and get this anchor point. And I'm going to use my arrow keys to nudge it over. That's looking pretty good. Maybe if necessary, we can bring it up a little bit. Meh. We'll give it a little bit of thickness there. I'm going to choose this one and give it a little thickness there. Now it looks really good. Zooming back out to place it inside of here. Can move it over. Can scale it down if necessary. And I'm going to put mine right on top of his eyes. Let's do the same for this one over here. Make a copy of it. This time I want it to flip the other way. So this will be a transformation. Let's go up to Object, Transform, and I want to reflect it. With Reflect turned on, notice that you can reflect it across a couple of axes, and I want the vertical axis, and I'll say OK, and now it's flipped the other way. Backing back out, going over to this guy. For him, it looks like he's got some little eyelids on top of it. Once again, we could build this by drawing off several circles and cutting them in half. But here's a little quicker way that maybe we could build all of this by just doing some concentric circles. Here's what I mean. I'm going to grab my ellipse tool and I'm going to draw off one big circle. Then I'm going to draw another circle inside of it. I'm going to go to Object and go to Edit. I'm going to make a copy of it and I'm going to paste it right in front of the other. So I can see the difference. I'm going to make this one a different color. Then when I go to scale it down, hold down the Shift and the Option key to scale it from the center. In this case, all I've done is made the iris inside of it. Now comes the fun part. Use your selection tool to select both of the circles. With both of them selected, let's find the knife tool, which is hiding underneath your scissors or your eraser tool. With this selected, hold down the Option key first, then hold down the Shift key. As you click and drag right along the middle, this is going to cut both of those directly in half. Now I've got a top portion and a bottom portion that I can work from. I want this bottom portion to be the outside or the main white part of my eye. So I'm going to change its color to be white. And to be honest, I want to move this on top of here so I can see it. And then we're going to scale it down a bit. So with both of them selected, let's scale it down. Now I can start to see it. Continuing editing, since I cut this middle one in half as well too, I'm going to get rid of the top half. Now you see what I'm doing with it. This bottom portion, we're going to make it darker. And the top portion, all I need to do is make it slightly larger. So I'm going to hold down the Option and the Shift key. I'm going to click on this top edge and bring it up. Actually, I don't need the Option at all. Let's just hold down the Shift key and make it slightly bigger. Now I've got my eyelid and my eye that I can select all three of those and let's group them together. Finally, hold down Option and let's make a copy of it over here. For this guy, he looks relatively simple. I could simply draw off some circles and put that in the center of his eyes. But I tell you what, let's get crazy. I'm going to zoom in. This time, I'm going to start off by making a simple circle right here, roughly where I want the eyes to go. Let's use AI to see if we could generate something. Go up to Object and locate the Generative Shape Fill. Yours may be called something else. And for our prompt, let's do a robot eye. From here, you can change the amount of details, whether you want more or less detail. I want minimum detail to keep up with the style reference that we're working from. Under the reference style, I want to make sure nothing is selected, but under Effect, I also want to make sure that this is a flat design. I don't want it to look isometric or have any other kind of style that's not part of these robots. If you want, you can choose certain color tones, but I'm going to keep it blank for now and simply hit Generate. We'll give it a few moments to think of some ideas. And remember, these different variations are going to appear in your Properties panel. Now with it done, you can click through each of the different objects. You can see in this case, it's giving me a much more realistic looking eye. Once again, if you need to change up your prompt, you can go with one of those, or you can simply generate more options. I kind of like this second option that it gave to me here. Now, even with it created, I can zoom in. I can see the amount of detail that's inside of it. And if I wanted to edit this, I can expand it and ungroup it. Let's go to Object and Ungroup. From here, now I can go through and make changes to everything. You may have to ungroup it several times in order to select each individual part, or you can double click on it to go into your isolation mode. For example, I want to get rid of this outside edge and not have it be so light. So I'm going to double click on it. Let's go into that path, and with that outside edge selected, I'm going to make it a darker color that matches my design. Let's do the same for some of these inside portions as well. Again, at this stage, the color is really up to you, however you want to design this, but you don't have to be stuck with what's been generated. And again, you don't have to use AI fill or AI generation. I simply did it to see how quickly and what it would come up with. To be honest, this particular style doesn't necessarily match the style of anything else that I've done, so this may not be a direction that you want to go in. It's just an option. That's why we're getting crazy. Now with this done, I'll zoom back out, and I need to group it back together again. I'm going to lock down my head so I don't accidentally select him. Object, Lock Selection, click over all of my eye, and then Object and Group. Make a copy of it and put him right there. Now we've gone from a simple, boring design to something a little bit more detailed. For this last one, it looks simple, but in addition to the simple eyes, I also want to create this little lower part of his face mask. And to do that, we're going to have to do some compound shape adjustments. Now, since I want this lower part to align perfectly with the edges of this shape, I'm going to make a copy of this shape. Hold down Option and just drag it over. Finally, I need to be able to cut out the top portion and just keep the bottom portion of this. So in order to do this, I'm going to grab my Ellipse tool and simply I'm going to change the color so we can see what it looks like as well. I'm going to simply click and drag and draw off the line that I want it to be. I think that looks pretty good there. If you can't see what you're working with, you can always swap it over so you can see that alignment. Now to make sure that this is aligned perfectly centered with both of those, I'm going to select both of them and then go over to my alignment panel and choose the center alignment. Now they're perfectly aligned with each other. In order to cut away and to fill in this bottom portion, I'm going to select both of these. Let's use our Shape Builder tool. Remember, you can hold down the Option key to cut away the outside edge, and that's going to leave us with this bottom portion. There are some Pathfinder things that could have been done, but I like this one. Now let's align it back on top of here. One more time, you can select both of them, choose Center Alignment, and have them both lined up, and you can move them up until they're nice and even with each other. I don't need this anymore, so I'm going to erase it away too. Finally, I'll do a color adjustment to make it something a little bit more noticeable. And let's keep the eyes simple with some simple ellipses. I'll set their color to be just a solid white, or let's go with a lighter red. Click and drag, place your ellipse. Let's put another one on that side. Now that we've got the basic outlines for all of the head shapes and their eyes, most of the other parts of the robot are going to be exactly the same, using those shapes and being able to either cut out or modify them. The last thing I want to demo is working with just solid lines to create some of the complex shapes for either the mouth or either the antennas. Now in Illustrator, there's a lot of different tools that help you draw just lines and get precise details with those line details. However, working with some of the basic tools can also give you some really good results. Let's work with what we know. I'm going to choose my line segment tool, and I'm going to set my fill and stroke to be just a solid default. If anything, I'll get rid of my fill color. Going over to my stroke, I want to make it a little bit thicker, and let's see if we can make a curved little line for this little antenna. I'm going to click and drag and draw off my antenna. We can change the angle of it later. To make it curved, let's use our reshape tool. With the reshape tool selected, I'll zoom in so we can see it a little bit better. We need to add some extra little points right on our line and then move them around. So I'm going to add one here, move down a little bit, add another one, and another one, and another one there. From here, you can then use your direct selection tool, the white arrow, and click just on the anchor point. When you select one anchor point, you can see how it moves outward and bends your shape. That's how we can get this nice little curved area that's set for here. From here, all we need to do is adjust the size or the width of our stroke. If necessary, we can change the end cap to be rounded so it rounds off nicely. And then we need to add the other little bits to it as well. So I'm going to add a little circle at the top. Oops, make sure it's deselected before you change your fill color. We'll set this one to be just a dark red with no stroke. Click and drag. Let's add a little part to the end. And the other part of the ear can be a simple rounded rectangle. I want that part to be behind it, so let's go up to Object, Arrange, and let's send it to the back. Now that I've got one antenna, I can stick it on his head, and if necessary, I can rotate it by selecting both of these and nudging it into place. To make a copy of this one, I'm going to hold down my Option key as I click and drag, or you can simply copy and paste, and we want to flip this on the other side. Let's go up to Object, Transform, and Reflect. From here, I do a vertical reflection, and I'm going to simply nudge it into place, and let's send that to the back as well too. Object, Arrange, and send it to the back. To do his mouth, we need to be able to either cut a circle or we need to be able to bend a simple line. Let's do a cut circle method. I'm going to draw off a simple ellipse. I'm going to set my ellipse fill color to be none with a black stroke for now. Clicking and dragging, holding down the Shift key will give me a perfect circle. I'm going to align it right where I want it to be. From here, I'm going to set my stroke to be a little bit thicker. That looks good. And this time, let's use our scissors tool. With the scissors tool, I can go down to my line of my selected circle, and I can clip right on the path where I want it to cut. So I'm going to do one there, going over to the other side, and clip there. Then, the remaining circle, if it's selected, I simply delete it away. From here, I can select my mouthpiece that's remaining, and I'm going to set the stroke style to have a curved cap. So now I've got this mimicking that. If necessary, I can move it into place, and I can make it a little bit thicker, depending on how you want that to be styled. With this done, I'm now going to speed through and recreate all the details that I need for each of my heads. Remember, you only need to do 5 heads for this particular project.
Go, Mr. Ibe, go, making those robot parts, doing all the things that he knows to do, but doing it quickly, kind of making a montage and eating up time. Skibbity-dop-bop-a-doo-ba-da-da, yeah.
All right, with all 5 of these finished, the last thing that I would recommend doing is grouping the heads together. Each head should be selected. You can do Command G to group, or you can select it and choose group down here as well. By grouping them, it makes it so much easier to be able to click and drag the entire thing and to treat them as one particular object. Notice that when I did these, I did some slight modifications from their original design. In the next video, we're going to be adding all of the body elements to each of your designs, and then we'll talk about changing up the colors.